In 1812, one man stood at the pinnacle of the world, his shadow stretching across a conquered continent. This was the Europe of Napoleon Bonaparte, an empire forged in fire and ambition, stretching from the coast of Spain to the borders of Poland. The tricolor flag flew over a dozen capitals, and the armies of France marched as masters of the European destiny. For a moment, it seemed as if nothing could stop the momentum of this new Roman Empire, and that its architect was a figure destined for eternal glory. He was a man who had risen from obscurity to become an emperor, a military genius whose name was whispered with a mix of awe and terror. Napoleon Bonaparte was more than a general. He was a force of nature. His soldiers worshipped him, his enemies feared him, and the people of France saw in him the embodiment of their revolutionary ideals. He commanded from the front, his presence on the battlefield enough to turn the tide of a desperate fight. His authority was absolute, his vision singular. He had remade the map of Europe in his own image, but the world he had built rested on a foundation of perpetual conflict. Despite his unparalleled power, the emperor was not without his worries. In the shadowed confines of his war councils, the whispers of resistance grew louder. The old monarchies of Europe, defeated but not destroyed, formed fragile alliances waiting for a sign of weakness. And on the far eastern edge of his domain, one colossal power remained defiant: the Russian Empire. Tsar Alexander I refused to bow, challenging Napoleon's continental system and daring the master of Europe to act. The pressure was immense. For an empire built on the illusion of invincibility, defiance could not be tolerated. The decision, when it came, was both predictable and catastrophic. With a single determined gesture, Napoleon pointed his finger east on the campaign map, toward the vast unknown plains of Russia. A heavy silence fell over the room as his marshals absorbed the gravity of the command. The drums of war, which had beaten incessantly for a decade, faded into an ominous quiet. In June of 1812, the gears of the largest European invasion in history began to turn. The fatal decision had been made. It was an army of unprecedented scale, a river of humanity flowing eastward. The Grande Armée numbered over 600,000 men, a multinational force drawn from every corner of Napoleon's empire. Endless columns of infantry, cavalry, and artillery stretched to the horizon, kicking up clouds of dust under the hot summer sun. This was not merely an army, it was a moving city, a demonstration of overwhelming power designed to crush the Tsar's will through sheer force. How could any nation stand against such a titan? But the Russians chose not to stand. They had a different strategy, one born of patience and their own unforgiving landscape. As Napoleon's army advanced, the Russian forces retreated, refusing to give him the decisive battle he craved. In their wake, they left nothing but devastation. They employed a scorched earth policy, burning their own villages, destroying their crops, and poisoning their wells. The Grande Armée marched deeper into a hostile, empty land, its long supply lines stretching to the breaking point. The landscape itself was becoming the enemy. Finally, after a brutal and bloody battle at Borodino, Napoleon reached his prize, Moscow. But there was no delegation to offer the city's surrender. He entered a ghost town, its streets eerily silent. Then the fires began. Set by Russian patriots, the flames consumed the city, destroying the very shelter and supplies the French army desperately needed to survive the coming winter. Napoleon sat in the Kremlin, master of a burning, empty ruin. It was a victory that felt in every way like a defeat. The emperor had captured a capital, but he had lost the war. As if on cue, the weather turned. General Winter, Russia's most formidable commander, arrived with a terrifying suddenness. The first snows fell, quickly turning into blizzards and a deep Arctic freeze. Temperatures plummeted, and the once mighty Grande Armée was caught completely unprepared. Soldiers in tattered summer uniforms froze to death in their sleep. Horses, starved and weak, collapsed by the thousands. The wind howled like a predator, and the world turned into a nightmare of white and gray. Hope froze alongside the rivers. The retreat was an apocalyptic vision of chaos and despair. The proud army that had marched into Russia was now a broken, stumbling column of ghosts. Starving, frost-bitten men shuffled through knee-deep snow, abandoning their cannons, their loot, and their dying comrades. The retreat became a desperate, primal struggle for individual survival. The relentless, cold, and swarming Cossack raiders picked off the survivors one by one. The grand dream of empire was dying in the Russian snow, one frozen soldier at a time. The cost of this single, arrogant miscalculation was staggering. Of the over 600,000 men who marched into Russia, fewer than 100,000 would ever make it out. Over 500,000 lives were consumed by ambition, fire, and ice, their bodies left buried under the vast, uncaring winter. The Grande Armée, the instrument of Napoleon's power, had been utterly annihilated. Back in his tent, the emperor was a diminished figure. The aura of invincibility shattered forever. The crown, a symbol of his monumental achievement, now seemed a hollow and heavy burden. As the last candle flame flickered and died, it plunged the master of Europe into darkness, a fitting metaphor for the end of his dominance. One decision, born of pride, had not only sealed the fate of the greatest army of the age, but it had also triggered the final collapse of an empire and redrawn the course of European history forever.